this particular session is on the issue of food security and agriculture. And in my interrelated mind, everything seems relevant to everything else.
And I think we understand food security to be the situation where all people at all times have both physical and economic access, ability to procure food that makes their lives productive at all times. So, and I would say there are so many causes of food insecurity. I mean, a good example, the disaster we were just discussing in the last session. But I think, from our perspective, the leading cause of food insecurity is really poverty. You look at folks who don't have very much money anyway. Poor people who are earning less than $1 a day are generally spending about half of their incomes on food. So already very much stretched to the limit. So any small disaster, even a mini crop failure or an illness in the family, really pushes them to the brink of intolerance pretty quickly. So poverty is the main cause.
There's actually just a very tight interconnection between global health and global development, and in particular in agriculture. As we look at food security, we focus on the rural sector because about 70% of the world's poor are in the rural sector, and so, as Julie says, they are dependent upon agriculture for their well-being. It's one where we have a number of programs, but the primary way that we work is through governments, that they have their programs that they want to support, but we very much work with the civil society organizations and the NGOs in trying to get to the world's neediest.
And am I right in saying that it's both creating access to markets, but also ensuring that those small farmers have the right inputs?
It is both. I mean, it's ensuring the right inputs, it's ensuring the right infrastructure, the right capacity to be able to use the inputs, and then working to make sure that they can get not only the food for themselves, but if they can create a surplus, that they can get it to markets.
You build local CSO capacity, how you foster leadership, indigenous leadership. So the president's remained active in the formation of the partnership. We've worked very closely with the diplomatic corps in Washington, and with bringing civil society, private sector representatives to Washington, and it's quite amazing. I think we're a very tiny organization, but people know us because it's so rare to see often in meetings African representatives, presidents, Congress and Parliament representatives, CSOs, private sector, actually talking themselves about their own programs and their own initiatives and their ideas for priorities, rather than having that sort of interpreted third or fourth hand through a U.S. official or a development expert.
Lots of times, since they are smallholders, it's just the fact that they're remote and that they are fairly isolated as individuals, and so we have some important programs that I like a lot, which are looking more at collectives, looking at how to give the collection of small farmers more of a voice, and to give them more power of being able to deal with the markets.
How do you empower not only the government, but the civil society and private sector, to step up and have a real voice in that process? And then, of course, the next step is, how do you monitor, right? How do you monitor the commitments? How do you monitor that your own government, if you're an African, how do we monitor from the U.S. that our government is contributing what it says it will?
In talking a little bit about the opportunity for capacity building, because I think that one of the greatest opportunities and one of the greatest challenges and needs that we see is in this area of capacity building, and it's with a long-term horizon.
Kathy's family owns supermarkets through southern Africa.
My family have been involved with agriculture, with our supermarkets, getting the food from the farmers to market. One group, I was up there last year, was being charged an outrageous amount, so they actually came out with nothing. So the issues around transporting.
I'm wondering if in this kind of new reinvestment in this area, if you'll see more investment in more nutritious crops, or kind of more locally appropriate, kitchen gardens, for example. I mean, why is that so absent, and what would it take to increase investment in that area?
I heard from several people, farming is not something that the youth of Africa want to do. I heard something very interesting from the president of Kalimo Trust. I don't know if you know that one. It's an East African foundation. But he said to me one time, he goes, I have started to think about these kids on street corners who are selling roasted ground nuts don't realize it. They are actually part of the value chain for ground nuts. And our responsibility is, to see farming as more than just what happens on the ground, but help people see that it's actually a whole value chain, and you can be involved as in any part of it, just like we see here in the U.S. and in South Africa. And so what does it take to make that roasted groundnut dealer, dream about his groundnut processing facility and, exporting to groundnuts to wherever. So I think that's a challenge for all of us.
It's inconceivable that you can separate agriculture and nutrition. And so from our perspective, we're trying to increasingly integrate that. And I think that the supermarkets, interestingly, play a very important role in that, because if you think of supermarkets as the head of Whole Foods actually said to me one time that they view themselves as consumer purchasing agents. And so what they're doing is they're actually sourcing the product that consumers want, but they're also helping educate the consumer as to what is available. And so to the extent that it is possible to increase the supply chain to where you can source more locally, more nutritionally, that's something that I think we should all work towards as well.